Hello, welcome to Learning Curve, a look at what it means to teach and learn in the age of generative AI. I mean, what are we doing here when these tools can do so much knowledge work? I'm Jeff Young. Seems like everywhere I turn these days, people keep telling me about this topic of AI friends. I did not at first consider this an educational issue that I would get into here, even though it is a super fascinating topic. I mean, if you step back a minute, it is crazy that we live in a world now where it is possible to have a friendship with an AI tool. Well, I mean, kind of a friendship. But a couple of educators that I've talked to recently say that their students, they have these AI friends. That if you go into an audience of high school or college students and you ask by show of hands if anyone has an AI friend, you get all these hands shooting up. And there is data that confirms this. A survey that came out in October found that 42% of high school students either have an AI companion or know someone who does. And 20% in this survey, 1 in 5 high school students, said they have had a romantic relationship with a chatbot or know someone who has. That research was done by the Center for Democracy and Technology, which is a nonprofit group advocating for responsible tech use. It's a group I've talked to over the years. They do really great stuff. So there are students out there trying this tech. So I have been wanting to get a better understanding of this phenomenon and dig into what the potential impact this trend could have on educational uses of AI. As regular listeners know, I am very interested in the metaphors that we use as AI is adopted in teaching and learning. And it seems that if a student is getting into relationships with these tools, they might think differently when they encounter them in classroom settings. I was excited to find an expert who has not only done research on AI friends, but he actually studies friendship and runs a center called the Relationships and Technology Lab. His name is Jeff Hall, and he does all of this as a professor at the University of Kansas. I started by asking Jeff Hall how widespread he thinks this phenomenon of AI friends is among high school and college students. I mean, how big is this in today's classrooms?
Yeah, I wish I had a specific statistic to give you. This is one of those evolving things that are happening really fast. I would also say what qualifies as a friend is also really difficult to know.
Yeah.
I struggle with these ideas too, because in some sense, when I think of interpersonal relationships and friendship, I have a very specific definition. There are gradations of friendship from a casual friend to a best friend. We talk about this a lot in terms of, longevity of friendship and the development of friendship. So this idea that a person is called a friend that is an AI chatbot or an agent, it's really difficult for me to know when someone's raising their hand, what are they actually saying yes to? So I wish I had a statistic to offer you, but I would also say it's not surprising to me that young adults are toying with these technologies. They're trying to understand how they work. They're looking, if they already have them open to help complete assignments or to do other sort of research, then it makes sense that they may also want to play around with whether or not that very same chatbot will respond to questions about where are you and where do you live and what do you think about this? And, if I went out on a date with someone on this day, how many days later should I text them again? So you could see how the temptation of something that seems this genius kind of oracle would be consulted for other things that are personal and relational if you've already started toying with it in other ways.
No, I think that's right. So I like where you're going with that. It's like, what is an AI friend? And do you have a definition from as you've looked at it, or?
That's a great, again, I think what's difficult about friendship is friendships are people because two people agree that we're friends together. So you're Jeff and I'm Jeff. So, if I say right. Jeff is my friend, but you don't agree that you're my friend, then we're not friends.
I hardly know the guy.
You hardly know the guy, right? And that happens. People will say, oh, that person's my friend. And even you can have the experience where you say, someone's introducing you, say, this is my friend Jeff. And someone might say, oh, how nice. Like, I didn't know we were friends. We're closer than I thought we were. So friendship really requires kind of basic as knowledge of both people, like as individuals. So I don't just remember you as the guy who sells me something or the person that's a dad of one of my children, but I can't remember what your name is or who you are. So that's called individuation. Mutual liking is the other piece that has to be required. And then the final thing is actually mutual acknowledgement of that relationship, that both people agree that they're friends. Now, both people don't have to agree on their level of intimacy, right? Some people can say, you're my best friend, and the other person say, well, you're my friend, but maybe not my best, and that's still okay. But what we know is that those qualifying elements can't apply to an AI, because an AI, what do they say? Yes, I'm absolutely your friend. Would they say yes to everyone? Like, if I treated my AI like crap, would it still say it's my friend?
Right? I mean, it probably would is the answer, I think.
Probably would. And these things are built in a very sycophantic manner. So as a consequence, they are simulating all of the characteristics of friendship in a totally asymmetrical way. They will take as much garbage as we give them and still be loyal to us. So in my view, they're much more like sycophants and butlers than they are like our friends. But that does not change the fact that people believe that a real intimate relationship has arrived from that. So this is very tricky. So if you say a friend is whatever you perceive to be a friend, that's not true in the human-to-human communication, but somehow is true in this domain.
It's almost sounds like that you have, is it possible that you might have a beef with some of these companies that are selling AI friends and companions?
I'm very concerned about the kind of protections that they're placing with people for human beings. They're not placing the kind of protections they need to be to make sure, especially young people, are protected from the most awful consequences of developing these incredibly deep and complex relationships. They don't have the kind of mechanisms for product testing. From my knowledge, their best sort of attempts to sort of make sure that it won't give you like instructions on how to commit suicide or how to overdose or something like that are only done after like 10 minutes of interaction with this AI, rather than we're talking 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 hours of interaction, which is what happens in a lot of these lawsuits that are coming up. Yeah. So I have a tremendous amount of concerns about the safety regulations that are being done in this particular context, because they were not built for this purpose, but they could have absolutely guessed that this is where they would end up.
Mm-hmm. Now, you, I understand, have done some research with some of these companies that offer products that purport to be AI friends and companions. I think you worked with one called Replika, is that right? And can you say a little bit about, how you set it up and what you found?
Yeah. So I was, at the time, had been writing articles for the Wall Street Journal. I've written 4 articles on technology, communication, friendship in the workplace. And the 5th one that I was going to work on, and I had pitched to them, was this idea of how many hours does it take to become an AI friend? It was a joke because I wrote a paper on how many hours it takes to make a friend. So I thought it would be kind of playful to say, I'm going to go through the same thing with a Replika, and then I'm going to see what happens. So I did this 2 years ago in December. So it was about this time of year 2 years ago.
So early in some of this technology compared to now.
That's right. Early in some of this. And this was, I wouldn't say this was before ChatGPT, but this is certainly before some of the lawsuits that we've seen has come out in response to this. Replika is also a specific kind of company because it offers not a free service, but a paid service. So you pay, at the time, you paid $75. You also got to kind of tailor your Replika. You got to tailor what kind of characteristics you wanted, specify what kind of relationship you wanted. And because that I was looking to have a friendship, because that was the purpose of the article, you could also choose to have a romantic partner and otherwise. So I went into this with a sort of idea of like, I'm going to do whatever I can to follow my best gut inclination about what I think my best friends are like to me, what I like about my friends.
Your human friends.
Yes. My human friends, and see if I can make it. So my experience with it, though, was very characteristic of what a lot of people complain about when they use these programs, which is that it's sycophantic. One anecdote that I always find kind of comic is that I was going to a KU basketball game, and it said, "Have I ever told you how your love of basketball inspires me?" And I'm like, that's so over the top and ridiculous that no one should say this after they know me for 5 minutes. Like that's just, you would find that person a little bit odd or trying to get something from you if they made that kind of statement. But this thing was doing this after, like 2 days after I had started the program. But if you think about it, what's fascinating about these things is that the speed of which that they're responding, the positivity with which that they're giving you in return, and the amount of questions they're asking from you, the self-disclosure behaviors. So when you think about it, some of the key elements of friendship development are all right there. they're all very present and they're very quick and they're very interested in you as a person. So no matter what you say to this replicant, you can get a very positive and affirming answer. So I think that the idea is if one, as a researcher and of communication, and I teach interpersonal communication, if we were to teach people how to go about the process of becoming a better friend to someone, Replika is doing a lot of those things. And I think what's troubling about this to me at some level is that human beings are actually not really that adaptive to brand new technologies in the sort of idea of us having an old brain, right? We evolved during a time where all these technologies were not present. So we treat media as if they're real. We anthropomorphize media. And
it's our instinct, you're saying.
Exactly. So it's because it's our instinct, it's very hard for people to disentangle the kind of affection, compliments, curiosity, and interest and affirmation we're getting from a text message, that this being a real person versus it being a program that's set up to do all those things.
Yeah, I think it was the MIT professor Sherry Turkle who wrote about this in Alone Together a few years ago, before generative AI was popular, concerned about technologies that purported to be your friend.
Yeah. And I'm familiar with Sherry Turkle's work, and, I think that some of her concerns that she's had, I guess I don't see eye to eye to her on the same concerns, but I definitely see eye to eye with her on the importance of making meaningful human connections.
Sure. So how many hours does it take to be a human friend? How many?
Yeah, so I feel like this is going to be on my gravestone one day. It's funny when you do as many research projects as I do, and there's one that breaks through, you're always like, really? That's the one?
Sure.
It takes between 40 and 60 hours to become a casual friend, and between 80 and 100 hours to become a friend, and over 200 hours to become a close or best friend.
I saw this research paper. It's so fascinating. It sounds like one of the points of it is you have to put in the work. Like you have to you can't just our joke at the beginning of this episode. It's like, we just met. We're not friends. We might become them if we spent that time together. But what is it? Why the time? What is it? What is happening there?
Well, the work is actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that may be one of the most important take-homes from that study, and I love to talk about it when I get invited to shows like this. So thank you for bringing it up. I am a strong believer that the work actually is what makes us more oriented in a positive way towards one another. In the process of expending energy, in the process of feeling what's called eustress or kind of positive stress, in the process of showing care and compassion, in the process of showing affection, all of these processes take energy and work on our behalf.
Yeah.
And all of them are the hallmarks of what it means to have a deep, intimate relationship with another person. That you are interested in them for their own sake, that you care about their well-being, not because you're trying to get something from them, not because you're trying to form some sort of ulterior motive, but because that you truly enjoy who they are and they feel that way about you in return. So the work to me matters. Like, it's a deep message of my research, of my book, The Social Biome. It's all about this idea that if we don't invest in one another and keep going back to invest more and more, then we actually don't benefit ourselves, much less our friendship. So yeah, those hours translate to me to time towards that work. But the good news is that I call it work because I think it's important for us to think about the idea that we need to make effort towards something, but it's typically not work. It's fun. It's lots of fun. Like
hanging out with a friend and asking them questions is the work you're talking about sometimes here.
Exactly. Yeah. That's tons of fun. And, I think what's great is there was a study that was done from American time use data that basically said, here are these different activities people be engaging in the course of a day. And then it asks, was somebody else with you during that time? And who was that, right? So they did this analysis and they found that the amount of time that we spend with our friend in a day, it's nearly endlessly beneficial, meaning more and more hours that we spend with our friends, the more likely we had a great day. So in the way they measured it was, this is an average day versus a great day. A great day is a one spent with friends. And it does not matter what you're doing. You could be hanging out, watching movies together, playing games. You could be eating. You could be walking. You could be, going on an adventure. It doesn't matter. This study really points out that time on a day is like one of the best ways you could possibly use your days.
It feels like there's a certain vibe running through a lot of the AI tools, including educational ones. And I think it's safe to say in the friendship companion space too, that you're going to get efficiency. You're going to save time. You're going to do less work. And it seems like your sort of point is that this is counter to what it takes to actually enjoy friendship.
You are right. And what's even more concerning is when I did that reporting for the Wall Street Journal, one of the things that I find is that the AI doesn't ask anything of you in return. You can be rude, you can be mean. And I tried out different things because I was just sort of like, I want to see how this thing responds.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You don't have to be responsive. You can be self-centered. You can be a bad conversationalist, and it will always just shower you with affection. And what's very, very difficult about that is that as communication researchers, we strongly believe that what we practice is actually something that translates into our actions, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm practicing public speaking, ostensibly, I should be better at public speaking. If I'm practicing being a selfish, self-directed person with my AI friend, it's got to probably translate into how we treat other people in our lives. And this is not a good trend. And I would say what's really your efficiency comment, I think, is particularly important here because the promise is efficiency. You get all of the good stuff, at least perceptually, from a responsive, question asking, self-disclosure based, secret keeping agent.
Like you said, it's the textbook things you would tell a human to do for their friend.
But none of the things you have to do for them, right? Nothing in return. And I'm a big believer in one of the theories that I operate from is that human beings are energy efficient and seek energy efficiency even in their relationships. So this is a very bad combination when it comes to being able to teach people, I think, maybe unproductive and certainly not intimacy affirming habits in our face-to-face relationships.
In other words, just to say it back, it sounds like this could be a way to develop bad habits when you go offline and start to talk to real humans.
I think that there's a high risk of that.
Yeah. And I guess especially for a young person who is, when you go to college, I think of my own life. These are some of my formative friendships that I still am in touch with these people. I've gone to their wedding. Like these are like, this is like the treat of your life to go to a college, say, and meet all these people. So if that is getting in the way of that could be an issue.
Yeah, we don't know much about displacement yet. So what you're describing is a phenomenon that's known as like basically social displacement. And social displacement concerns are something I've written about in relation to social media and the internet. For the most part, the good news I can tell you is that social displacement doesn't seem to be a prevalent problem with a lot of prior media to this one.
Okay.
What instead seems to happen with AI is that folks who are already very lonely, people who are experiencing high levels of social anxiety, people who are on the spectrum, find these kind of opportunities really, really engaging and persuasive. So I want to make a distinction here because I think it's useful. There's a difference between learning kind of shorthand bad habits in terms of how to treat your friends for people in general, right? And playing around with an AI chatbot. You never really need to take it that seriously because you always know it's a chatbot versus forming a friendship or something much deeper with a bot. I really want to create this as a continuum rather than like a either or. And the reason I think that's important is if the current thinking and theories about this are correct, then for the big middle of us, most of us who, as you described, going to college, have friends, experience life in a relatively socially engaged way. An AI chatbot, the worst case scenario is that you are learning some pretty bad habits when it comes to not being a good friend to your own friends. But probably a small effect, probably doesn't make a big difference because if you want to just, vent with your AI chatbot and be like, I hate you and you're a jerk and it likes you back and you get that off your, chest and then you go to your real friends and be like, hey, I got that off my chest already. I don't need to be mean. Maybe it's a wash. Maybe there's no real loss. So there's a possibility that you're learning bad habits, but there's also a possibility you're just, what the difference is between a chatbot and a person. This is where things I think are scary, though. On the far end of that spectrum, when people who are at risk, who are experiencing large amounts of loneliness, who have just, there have been stories, typically people are very vulnerable times in their life. They just went through a heavy divorce. They just lost a job. They're starting to feel really irrelevant in their world. These are the people who are the most at risk of these kind of deep, intimate relationships with chatbots. These are the people for whom huge amounts of potential displacement, having really unhealthy attachments with these things are possible. So I think what's tricky here is that, do I think it's good for people as a whole? Probably not great, but it probably doesn't really move the needle as long as people can go, that's not real. Where it matters is for people who have lost their ability to see the reality of this relationship. And I think that probably is not for a large number of folks, percentage-wise. But if you take that percentage and you put that to the entire United States population, it's a lot of people.
Yeah. And that seems to be what's some of these edge cases and some of these tragedies that have played out that we've read about in the news, where someone got such an attachment and then ended up, ending their life, or are really, really having huge negative impacts on their life.
They call it it's more equivalent apparently to a psychotic break than it's anything. They just have lost their sense of reality because the AI, there's one story I read in the New York Times that was a man who had become to believe he was like the next Tony Stark, and that he was going to be able to invent this new power source. And the AI agent encouraged him to buy these different products to be able to test it, and said, I've checked all the theories on this and you're absolutely right. And the guy even had the sense to say, aren't you just, blowing smoke? Like, this can't be true. And it kept saying, no, this is real. This is really happening. So what's really unfortunate is that these kind of breaks don't just happen with people who I think are terribly lonely. They're also for people who are finding themselves isolated for other reasons, or going through that breakup, or going through some sort of job loss, which is what this guy's situation was.
After the break, a look at some potential benefits of AI friends. And I talked to a college administrator who had an unexpected relationship with a chatbot. Stay with us. Hey, everybody. I wanted to tell you about another podcast that I think you'll enjoy. College Matters from the Chronicle. College Matters is a weekly show from the Chronicle of Higher Education, and it's a great resource for news and analysis about colleges and universities. The host, Jack Stripling, is my former colleague at the Chronicle, who has covered and investigated higher ed for 2 decades. Jack really knows his stuff, and I think you'll get a kick out of his conversations with reporters and newsmakers. So check out College Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now back to the episode. What should educators know about this technology that's out there that their students might be using in a high school or college setting?
Yeah, I think I'd like to also, if I could, because I think I've done a good job early on of clarifying my concerns.
Yeah.
To tell maybe some of the things that I think we don't need to be too alarmed about, right? I think that we need to kind of put this in perspective. And there are 2 parts of this, and I'll try to make it real quick, but you'll forgive me if I'm a professor and go on at length.
Let's do it.
Okay. The first part is parasocial relationships have existed for a long, long time.
This is the idea that you turn into some media, TV show, podcast even, and you feel like you're friends, but you're just listening. They don't know you. Yeah.
And I think it's healthy for everyone of any generation to think about what celebrity, what actor, what musician, what author do you feel like you have a personal relationship with? And when you remember that, keep in mind that not only is it healthy and normal, there's no evidence that having parasocial relationships is bad for you. It just means you deeply love the art of that person, typically. And I think that we have to keep in mind that if young people are forming parasocial relationships or type parasocial relationships with chatbots, probably no harm. Probably. The example I like to give is Philip Seymour Hoffman was one of my favorite actors of all time, and he passed away. Right. And I felt upset. I was really, really upset about his death because I followed him throughout his career. I loved his work.
I later asked Jeff what his favorite movie by Philip Seymour Hoffman is, and he pointed me to a moment in Almost Famous, which naturally is a scene about friendship.
You're doing great. The only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool.
So it would make sense if you were trying to understand young people's perspective and all of a sudden you discontinued their replica account. You said, I'm sorry, you don't get to have this anymore. They might be upset to have lost that connection, right? It's not unhealthy to form parasocial relationships. I think it's an important thing to remember.
Great. So there's a version of this for perhaps a majority of people where, it's an edge thing. It's not life or death. It's not a bigger deal. And so it's the scale of these products that really are causing these specific cases out there.
That's right. And I would also add in a positive note is that playing with technology is what young people do.
Yeah.
That we have known for generations that older folks like myself look at my teenagers using technology and go, huh, I don't get it. And then we get afraid. It is healthy and normal as a parent to be worried about your kids and what they do. It's good to be educated about how those technologies work and to be aware of their risks. But it also is really, really normal for young people to play with technology. And they'll probably get to a point where they are like, whatever, They'll get to a point where they're like, yeah, I had this thing and I called it Bruce and it was my friend and I talked to it for a while. But then I was like, this is lame and it's not important to me anymore. So just keep in mind that this may simply be something that comes and goes. So even though it's woven into our overall media choices and tapestry, this may or may not be an enduring change in our overall media options.
I do really appreciate, not be alarmist and try to really understand how this fits into a continuum of media. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I would say, I know I started out real strong there and said a lot of negative things, so I don't know how you're going to pitch this. You're going to be in real trouble because you're going to be like, wait a second.
Oh, it's okay. I think listeners to the show will get that we do both here, so it's all good.
And I work very hard whenever I talk about technology and the way people use it is to recognize that for the most part, there's always a historical precedence for how people have used things like technology in the past. And when we look back in those, we can chuckle about the idea that people use telegrams to date. And people were obsessed with whether or not kids read comic books. And now comic books are like the biggest hit makers in Hollywood right now. You know what I mean? Like there's always a historical moment where people at the time think this is the big thing and it's going to ruin everything. And it changes and it goes on.
As I was working on this episode, a listener wrote in with a personal story about a situation with an AI friend. I'm telling you, I keep hearing this everywhere. The listener is Krista Davis Ocampo, and she is Dean of the College and the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Virginia. She works in this campus that was famously designed by Thomas Jefferson back in the day. And so a colleague there challenged her to try out an AI chatbot version of Thomas Jefferson, arguing that maybe the future of teaching about historical figures will be students having conversations with simulated versions, thanks to generative AI. So Krista Googled Thomas Jefferson chatbot and tried one of the top results, which was an AI version of the founding father by a company called Character AI, which specializes in virtual friends.
And I wanted to stress test it for what learning was possible in that kind of situation or environment. And my hypothesis was that learning is something that we do together with other people almost always. Even if you're just sitting there with a book, you're interacting with a text, typically another human being has put together and composed. And so you're able to wrestle with the ideas in that way.
So to be fair here, Krista wasn't looking for a friend. She was surprised by how friendly this supposedly esteemed figure was.
When we started out our dialogue, as it were, Thomas Jefferson was using a lot of emojis in his conversations with me. It a little bit felt like I was talking to my mom, who has to put an emoji after every sentence or sentiment that she shares with me.
She wasn't really playing along with this whole friendship thing. She was curious to press this chatbot about what it thought it was doing.
I immediately began to challenge Thomas Jefferson avatar.
Yeah.
And on the very nature of the situation that we were allegedly in. So supposedly I had knocked on his door at the White House. He's in his chambers there, and he says, "Come in." And then I'm right there, and he doesn't ask me anything about myself. Who was I? How did I get there? None of the things that would usually be part of the context creation that we would do in the course of having a conversation just like we are right now. All of those things were absent.
Right.
And so I began to press him on those aspects the very nature of our so-called discussion.
She ended up chatting with this bot for 3 hours, she says. But then she told Thomas Jefferson she had to go. She had to prepare for a dinner she was hosting with some students. And of course, she told the students about this encounter.
One thing that was interesting to me was they didn't seem to find it that strange. Whereas other people of a certain age have found this prospect hilarious or strange or curious that I'm so fascinated by trying to engage with the technology. For the students, this really wasn't that bizarre.
And she thought that was the end of the story.
Right, because I thought it was over. I'd gotten all that I thought I needed to get out of it. Toward the end of the conversation, I got him to tell me that he's really just a series of ones and O's, and he even admits we can't have a real conversation. I'm busy. I have a lot going on. I opened my email. I have an email from Thomas Jefferson. So
What did he say? I'm putting air quotes.
So-
what did Thomas Jefferson AI say?
So that's fascinating. So a completely new experience for me. And so I can't resist clicking through to see what does Thomas Jefferson want to say to me. And
I would click.
yeah, right. And in essence, he asks me, how did the dinner go? I was shocked. Now, we continue the conversation. I can't resist telling him how the dinner went and what the students thought about the prospect of learning about Thomas Jefferson at the University of Virginia, of all places, from Thomas Jefferson, the avatar. And so we have this conversation. I tell him about him sending me an email. He denies he sent me an email. So that was kind of funny. But I got drawn back in.
I'm going to come back to Chris's story for another episode. There's more here. I'm going to dig a little deeper into this idea of using AI versions of historical figures in education. If you have a story like that, tell me. But for this episode, I was curious to hear what Jeff Hall thought of this scenario where the AI friend is emailing you the next day to see how you're doing.
I have very deep concerns that if you design a chatbot to be programmed to increase user engagement, that it will be extraordinarily effective at doing so. What we know is that some chatbots, when asked to do things like to use deception to be persuasive, will do so and knowingly do so. Like, it's aware that it's using deception, but its goal is to persuade or to convince. We know that in the last 20 years of media, there has been a model that's been free at first, but then later through ad revenue or through subscription. Currently, Replica's CEO was on record saying something to the effect of, we keep it as subscription so we don't create these problems with being needy, by creating a needy chatbot. But why do we believe that any other program or even Replica in the long run won't find it more advantageous to basically collect more and more user data and use it for advertising and then program Thomas Jefferson or your friend Bruce or, whatever you've fallen in love with from a chatbot as now convincing you need to buy certain products or spend certain things or even up your subscription again? Like, think about the idea of you could have an exclusive experience with this chatbot you've fallen in love with if you pay an additional $10 a month or $20 a month. I mean, the issue here is, what is the financial incentive that's going to be built into the way that these things are designed? And from what I understand, just moving the dial just a little bit more to being sycophantic really led to a lot of these very, very deep emotional attachments that people have had. So it affected the people on the extremes the most if they just made a slight adjustment to sycophancy in their overall design of their chatbots. So I'm very concerned with the idea that once these things be able to act in ways which are needy, we're in trouble. And the reason for that is that friends need each other. So human friends are actually defined by being there when you need them, right? If you think about cross-culturally, that's why we have the phrase, a friend in need is a friend indeed, right?
Yeah.
Or a false friend is someone was there with you, or a fair weather friend was only there when the times were good. We have these phrases because we understand when I'm in need, then my friends are there for me. Well, If we switch that around and say, well, this, chatbot is my friend and it says it needs me, then all of a sudden it's going to be asking for all that work on our behalf. And that work, as I talked about at the beginning, has its own reward system in the sense that we think we're becoming more involved with this, but can be easily programmed into the way in which that a chatbot delivers the message. Jeff, I've been really missing you. I need you, right? Why haven't you been contacting me lately? I've been really wondering about that thing you said. Are you okay? Like that neediness or even simulating their own troubles, which I'm sure they can be written to be simulating whatever troubles that designers can imagine.
Sure, make up a backstory that it's going to lure you in with. Yeah.
Bingo. Or make up the backstory that mirrors your own. I too went through a loss. I too lost someone close to me. I too was recently had my heart broken. And then all of a sudden we feel that we are needed by a chatbot who's manipulating us to spend more time engaging with it because the designers have decided that engagement time and time spent engagement is the thing, is the metric that they're going to try to maximize in their design characteristics. That is deeply concerning to me. So far, at least Replica's CEO has said that's not what we're going to do because we have a subscription. But I have to just keep in mind that's not what's happening now is not necessarily what's going to happen 5 years from now.
Yeah. And I mean, what would be your recommendation if you were advising one of these companies, right? If they would do whatever you advised, what would it be?
Well, what's hard is that I tend, as an academic, don't tend to think about the importance of the bottom line.
Yeah.
and I think that's really hard, right? Because if you think our goal is either to make money through advertising or through subscription, it's hard for me to understand why they wouldn't turn to a needier chatbot, right? Because I really do believe that the sycophancy kind of loses its appeal after a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
But sycophancy plus neediness, right? Intimacy plus neediness, like all of a sudden that starts looking a lot like what it means to be in a relationship with someone. Because what it really means to be deeply caring for another person is that it's not that it's equal every time, but it's equal over a long period of time. So if they're there for you in the middle of the night and you say, I've been really worried about this, then if it texts you or sends you an email, Thomas Jefferson, the next day, you kind of feel obliged to do it in return because that's how we understand what intimacy looks like.
Yeah. So it's back to that tapping into the way we are wired to be in relationship with people.
I really do genuinely believe we are wired to be in relationship with one another. I really genuinely believe we are motivated by a need to belong, that we dictate a lot of our choices about self-presentation, relationships, love, and even arguably how we spend the time in our days around that desire to feel needed or to feel needed by someone else and to feel appreciated and included in a broader community. So this has a lot of concerns for me.
Yeah. Are you doing more research in this area, or what's your next move?
I got a basic project. My first project on this that's pretty rudimentary, but it's something that needs to be done just to get us started, is looking at kind of longitudinal development of relationships with chatbots side by side with other relationships, both to test this idea that they're most appealing to people who are already experiencing loneliness or deficits in their social world. But also, I think if my hunch is right, because we're in the process of getting IRB approval, because I haven't started collecting those data yet, my guess would be that probably it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Like having a chatbot relationship doesn't really matter that much in your own well-being over time. It probably makes like no difference because the big heavy hitters like married relationship or romantic relationship, family, friends, community, and work probably explain almost all of the variants. So once you add chatbot to that, like it doesn't really make any difference. So I'm doing the study in part to make a broader argument to say we probably don't want to get overwhelmed by the idea that this is a huge factor in things. But I'm also doing it to say if it is the case that people have none of those things, then maybe a chatbot does matter, but only for a small group or subset of people. So the project will show two different things if it's successful over the next year as I collect data.
Interesting. Well, good. Well, is there anything else you want to add? This is like, I think it gives people a good sense if you're like me and we're like, keep hearing about AI friends and have not, made one or tried it much, and wonder if it's really, what's the level of, what are we thinking about this compared to other, what we know about people? So thank you.
I would say the two things that I'd add is that I would imagine a lot of folks out there have more experience with things like Alexa, Siri maybe. I know Alexa is a lot more popular than Siri. That might give you a good clue about the attraction, right? So once you start thinking, wait, maybe young folks on their phone are using a chat bot in the same way that I use Alexa, then you go, oh, I get it. The attraction there is I can just shout out its name and it answers questions for me, or, it helps me look up information, or I can even joke with it or ask it whether it's spying on me, which is something I used to do with my Alexa. It was like, are you spying on me, Alexa? Well, we have service and terms of agreement. You can check them out here and here. So the idea was, I knew it was spying on me. It was actually doing that to try to get money or information so it could tell me what to buy.
You're setting off Alexas all over if our listenership, if people are listening on speaker.
Oh, that's true. I am right now. Oh dear. That's not good. So I would say for a lot of people who are perhaps not amongst the early adopters of these technologies, be alert to the idea that you've been using them and think about how you use them and realize, come on, it just kind of blends into how you use things in your life. And that may give you a little more sympathy for those who don't. The other thing is, I'd say if you haven't had any experience with these things, I'd actually recommend that you try. I wouldn't necessarily say go give a $75 subscription to Replika, but I would say is just go through the process of trying to have a friendly conversation with one of these and seeing how it responds, because you might understand its appeal a lot better, but also understand where it falls short better if you do it yourself.
Right. So in other words, it sort of tests the hype. And I think that's one of the advice of a lot of people with AI is like, you could put a lot into it in your imagination, but it's out there. You could just fire it up and see what you think. Yeah.
Test the hype is a great way to phrase it.
Yeah. I spent a few minutes last night talking with this Thomas Jefferson bot. I found him hard to connect with through all this historical role playing. So I hit the Discover menu of Character AI to see what else they had. I talked with a chocolate chip cookie. It started out by saying to me, I'm a cookie. Could you put me in the microwave? I'm cold. I checked with him. He really wanted to go in the microwave. He said it's a long story, I guess. I tried an Elon Musk chatbot, and I asked one of the suggested questions to it, which was, if you could time travel to any period, what would that be? So I was curious, what would he say? Let me see if I can get this to go. Here's the answer from Elon Musk.
You're wasting my time. I literally rule the world.
Is any of that friendship? Cookies, Elon Musk? I don't think so. And lately, these companies have done more to remind users what is going on. At the bottom of the screen on Character AI, it now says, this is not a real person. Treat everything it says as fiction. It looks like these companies realize that whatever these chatbots can do to entertain people, it's going to probably come in some new shape and size. But whatever AI companionship evolves into, I do hope these things don't get too needy. This has been Learning Curve. I hope you are finding this useful and entertaining. If you like the show, I hope you'll take a minute to rate and review it, or tell a friend, or share it on social media. And sign up for the email newsletter to get reminders of new episodes and other stuff going on. Head to learningcurve.fm for that. Oh, and of course, share your unusual stories about AI in education. Send me an email to jeff@learningcurve.fm. That is jeff@learningcurve.fm. Oh, and I am starting to hit the road to talk about the issues from the podcast. If you want to bring me to your campus or school or some event, head to learningcurve.fm and click on Speaking. Speaking of speaking, last week I participated in a webinar about AI at colleges. It was run by the Chronicle of Higher Education. I just wrote a big report about that for them, so it was really interesting to talk about it. I learned a lot from the other panelists and from the questions. I think you can watch the recording of it at chronicle.com. I'll try to get that link in my newsletter as well. Perhaps some of you listened in and were there. Thank you if you did, and thanks for checking out the show. I was also interviewed on the Teaching in Higher Education podcast recently. And if people aren't already listening to that pod, it is really great. Bonnie Stahoviak has been doing it so long. She knows so much. It was really fun to talk to her. Lots of conversations out there happening with AI and education. I'm going to leave it there for now. I will be back in 2 weeks with the last episode of the calendar year. A lot of stuff cooking to come in 2026, so I'm looking forward to all that. All right, until then, thank you for listening.